Good afternoon from Cambodia and welcome to this session on facilitating connectivity and the best practices of collaboration. My name is Helen and I am the founder and international director for the Chab Dai coalition. Our afternoon session today will have three parts to it. The first part is an ethos for collaboration, looking at lessons learned from the field. During this session, we'll be looking at practical and evidence-based practice of what we have done on the. Our first slide is a little controversial and gives us a different perspective on the criminal network of global human traffickers. In fact, we're going to look at them as a model of collaboration. I feel that we have lessons to learn even from the criminal network. If we look at these lessons, they have a common vision. It's greed, it's power, it's control, but it's a common framework. And because of this, they have developed effective referral mechanisms around the globe. How else are they going to traffic and exploit millions of people every year? They have to have coordination. They know they cannot function within this process alone, so they work together, even if they don't like each other. They know who to contact. They know the competency and influence of each. They are also able to change to shifting and diverse environments. A recent example is within the legal framework in Cambodia. New laws have come in to protect victims of human trafficking. But human traffickers have learnt to move around this. They are now working in a different framework so that they are not caught within that law anymore. They are able to access vulnerable populations through other means that may be seemingly more legitimate or are less visible to the police and those who are going to prosecute them. They have adapted their working strategies to fit shifting environments. So for us, if we're going to address an organised criminal network around the globe, we need a competent organised network of broad and committed stakeholders who have a common vision to work together with an effective and robust response that outweighs that of the problem. Now that we have seen this network of the global traffickers, let's look at the response. We know the issue of human trafficking is overwhelming, and to be honest, the response is as equally overwhelming. We have media over this, government, thousands of NGOs, thousands more of churches, and tens of thousands of civil society, and probably more. Of course, there are many positive aspects to those who are responding to the issue of human trafficking. But if it's not coordinated, what is the outcome? We have to ask ourselves, are good intentions enough? We know that those who are addressing this issue in the main do have good intentions. But do we need to be moving beyond good intentions? What have we seen in the last decade in the response to human trafficking? Quite often we have seen a lack of coordination and accountability. We have seen that professional standards of dealing with victims have been less than they should have been. Many organisations are reinventing the wheel, either through a lack of understanding of the local context or a lack of understanding of the lessons that other agencies have already been through, or maybe a lack of understanding of the big picture. We have seen competitiveness among stakeholders over funds, over staff, and even over specific clientele that they wish to access. The other disturbing pattern that has emerged within this movement has been that of the hero complex, which has identified and given praise to only a handful of those working on this issue, again diverting attention away from the work of many and the need to celebrate collective impact. So, what do we need? There is a need for connectivity. We've seen that the issue is overwhelming, but we also need to be aware that this issue is complex and multifaceted. And if we're going to address this in its entirety, we need to know what are our areas of core competency that make up the response to abolition of the movement, within the movement, and survivor care. We have many aspects. We have policy, law, research, victim rehab, coalition building, ending demand, of course. We need prevention programs. We need intervention. We need education, training, and employment. All of these aspects are multifaceted, but they're critical if we're going to address the complexity of the problem. So you may say, I know all of those different aspects are complex, but I can do that on my own. I don't need to work with anybody else. So why is it essential for us to have an ethos of collaboration? We believe it is essential for those that we're working with and on behalf of to see a lasting and sustainable change. We have understood from research in recent years that if we truly work together in a collaborative manner, it is much more strategic. We increase our efficiency of our programs. We know that it results in raised standards of care. We know working in this issue is highly stressful, and working collaboratively means that we get solidarity and support. We see it has a multiplier effect if we work in a networked environment. We see an increase in accountability, which is sorely lacking in many areas of development. It increases our access to resources so that we don't have to either keep increasing resources that have already been developed. It means that we can improve on existing resources, and it reduces isolation. So maybe the ethos, the framework around this looks great. Lots of people are using the word collaboration. It's one of those words of the day right now. But how do we do it? How do we move from the ethos into practice? So the next two slides are just going to look at Chab Dai Coalition in Cambodia as a case study of how did we do this. So the very first thing is identifying those key stakeholders and strategic alliances. Now, it may be that we don't naturally want to work together. So what we need to do is we need to find common ground and vision among maybe a diverse stakeholder group. So rather than be aware and focus on the areas that maybe we don't agree on, maybe our programs look different, maybe some of our ethos is different, we need to focus on where is the common ground and vision. Only when we do that will we find a win-win situation. We need to have an open learning ethos so that we are not closed down to new ideas and new strategies. We need to have a very survivor-centered approach. So it's not about us. Actually, it's about the best for the survivors. And we need to learn to build bridges in environments that maybe are not our natural comfort zones, but we need to learn to build bridges. For us in Cambodia, once we understood who were those strategic partners for us, what came next? For us, we built a membership of organizations. This started in 2005 with just 11 agencies in Cambodia who we brought together to address this issue as a coalition. Right now, 8.5 years later, we have a coalition of 57 member organizations. But what do we do with them? It's an active learning community. We don't just want to have a membership, we want to see a learning community. So we listen to our members. We look at what are the issues, what are the gaps, what are the overlaps, what do we need to spend our time doing in order for their programs to be more effective. We spend much of our time training thousands of national staff. Training and capacity building is core to victim care and the future hope and healing that they have. But we also have to care for the staff. We need to make sure that there's appropriate debriefing and supervision. We need to develop research and toolkits. We spent many days and weeks bringing together relevant resources and disseminating these among members. We have many meetings that we just map the issues and responses so that we're all on the same page of the big picture of what are the issues, who's doing what, and where are the gaps. We focus in certain program areas, and then we have network meetings where we bring all of our members together to network with one another to see the big issues and the big responses. So what have been some of our lessons learned? We have good, bad, and the ugly. We have seen that we needed to keep redeveloping and changing and learning within our own coalition structure to stay relevant to the changing environment and context. But we've seen that this strategic big picture knowledge has improved communications. It's enabled grassroots practitioners to understand what evidence-based practice is and to share that with one another, to have greater accountability and more specialization. It has raised capacity of staff at all levels, and we've seen collaborative projects and research as a result. So what happened next? Of course, it's difficult to condense 8 years into a 10-minute PowerPoint presentation, but we're uploading some resources that we hope will help you understand a bigger picture. We're uploading our Chab Dai coalition evaluation so you can see some of our lessons learned in more detail. We're uploading our own journey of change research, which has really looked at the influencing factors of the anti-human trafficking movement here in Cambodia during the last 10 years, which we hope will help begin dialogue and also begin connectivity. So we hope that this conference is a great start in sharing and continuating this point for connectivity. Just to leave you with a few small sound bites before we move on to our next part. Never stop learning. It's been a mantra for me from the first day that I began getting involved in this movement. Almost 15 years on, I'm still learning. And I would say from this conference, develop at least one new partnership. Commit to researching big pictures in your country, in your region, but don't keep it to yourself. Share it with those who identify as your relevant stakeholders. Find others who have got a different expertise and experience, and then find a way to work with them and learn from them. The second part of our presentation this afternoon moves on from our lessons learned in Cambodia and the potential we saw for developing a broader network with an even more diverse stakeholder group. So this part 2 is scaling up to a global community. We know that true change can only be achieved through a collective impact. No single organization can address the complexity of abuse, trafficking, and exploitation on their own. It requires a cross-disciplinary, community-driven approach. In recent years, the anti-human trafficking movement has understood this and placed a heavy emphasis on collaboration and partnership. But to date, there still remain few effective mechanisms for facilitating coordination on a grand and global scale. At Chab Dai, our team has been ruminating on this missing collaboration piece, this gap in the movement, for many years. And now through our research, we've realized that the first step to achieving actual collaboration tends to look a little bit more like simple connectivity. A simple coordination of best practices and programs. And in April last year, we launched a professionally designed web application to the trial ground of the United States to test this hypothesis, called Freedom Registry. Here is an overview of that collaborative and groundbreaking initiative.
Hello, and welcome to the new Freedom Registry. With this project, we're hoping to facilitate new and powerful layers of connectivity for the anti-human trafficking movement. We provide a platform for counter-trafficking organizations, agencies, and institutions to get their voice out about their work. The public profiles help the movement to see who is doing what and where. And the organizations are able to update it all in real time. The aggregation of this data allows us to visually pinpoint gaps in services by stacking filters. Volunteers can use the tools to find organizations to plug into in very specific ways. To facilitate even more possibility for gains in connectivity and efficiency in the movement, we've launched an API. It's a window that enables third parties to build and connect their own tools for the movement, or to simply augment their own systems. And it also gives academics access to this continuous improvement of data for their own ongoing analyses. We think this makes for a better, more connected movement. And we're building our own tools too. Places for volunteers and advocates to engage with organizations and amongst themselves. Simple things like an interactive calendar to a very sophisticated online library where ideas can be discussed and vouched for, and where proven solutions can be distilled down to sets of actionable files to be replicated. Thank you.
And you can see that video over again. We will be putting a link up to that video. But you'll see that for Freedom Registry to be a true facilitator of connectivity, it needs to go global. And for this reason, we've been working with many national steering committees worldwide to tailor this Freedom Registry to each region of the world. You can see here on this world graphic the regions in yellow in which we've been working with local steering committees. These committees are asked to be representatives of a variety of disciplines and sectors within the movement, from government, academia, NGOs, private sector and community. While the regions with steering committees will be fully integrated into the Freedom Registry soon, we will be allowing the rest of the regions of the world to pre-register until their region is able to formulate a steering committee. We've structured our system in a way that allows all of this data to be filtered, even from the international level. We see this as a tool as the first step in identifying gaps in services and also enabling the organic creation of a transnational referral mechanism. Last year, I was in South Africa. We had victims of trafficking who were Cambodian, who had been trafficked to South Africa, something I never had anticipated us getting involved in. From that moment, I realized the potential and the need for not just having national coalitions and national referral mechanisms, but we needed this on an international level. Speaking to the South African organizations and police, they realized just how important it was for them to organize not just the agencies working on the ground in South Africa, but they needed to know who was working in Cambodia, who could be vouched for, who had specific programs. So our goal is to see this system simply amplify and accelerate real relationships that we can have around the table by providing a connection point for all of the broad stakeholders to work together for connectivity. On top of the Freedom Registry architecture, we are in the process of building an integrated and professionally designed suite of tools. The biggest one right now is a library, but it's no ordinary library. There are many experts working on this problem across a vast range of fields, and the natural question is, what are the best practices that are emerging? What's working and what's not? We have almost finished with a resource system that uses the power of proven social technologies to push the best answers to the top. For each subject, answers and comments are automatically and constantly shuffling in and out of the top positions in real time via a merit-based algorithm. The final part of our session this afternoon looks at the importance of research, and Siobhan will be overseeing this part of the presentation using Butterfly Project.
In today's session, I want to share with you about some of the emerging themes from a rather unique study currently being conducted in Cambodia. The study is called the Butterfly Longitudinal Reintegration Research Project, and it is following a cohort of survivors of sexual exploitation over a 10-year period, from their time in recovery assistance programs through to and beyond their reintegration integration into communities and wider society of Cambodia. While the study as a whole is broad, iterative, and exploratory, for today's talk I will focus on themes to do with stigma and sexual harassment from the point of view of participants and practitioners seeking to address these issues. In terms of the background of the study itself originates out of the Chab Dai coalition in Cambodia. For many years now, organizations within this coalition have been working with survivors of sexual exploitation, and most groups want to know about the short and long-term impacts of their programs on their clients' lives. While the short-term impacts can be more easily measured by programs themselves, because the clients are still in their programs, measuring the long-term impacts is difficult for any one group to do on its own. It became apparent over the years that a longitudinal research project encompassing clients from a variety of different programs would be a way forward. Thus, a 10-year study was commenced in 2010 with specific partnerships with 14 different assistance programs working in Cambodia, most of whom are members of the Chab Dai coalition. The overall focus of this study is to understand the participants' perspectives and experiences of reintegration and integration through listening to their voice. This study is about voice, and through their voice, we hope to inform programming, policy, and enter wider debates locally, regionally, and globally. In terms of sample and methodology, we follow 128 participants, male and female, adults and children. We use a mixed methods approach. We meet participants 3 times per year, and we hold roundtable discussions with partners and stakeholders to gauge their response and how they're using our findings. All in all, it's a very iterative process in how we conduct this research and how we analyze this research. A strong theme that's come out over the past few years related to stigma is the issue of trust and who one can safely disclose to. Throughout the years, we find that while Cambodia is a very collective culture, a very group culture, not particularly strong on individuality, there is, amongst our participants, there's this sense of great loneliness because there's a great fear of who one can really trust and not be outed or forced disclosure on their past experiences or their current problems. The benefits in the shelters are they most appreciate the counseling on offer, and in the community programs, most of the participants appreciate having counselors that they can talk confidentially to about their past and their current. And this is a great issue for people who are reintegrating from shelter programs back into communities where there might not be, they might not have access to any counseling or anything of that nature that's confidential. So there tends to be a great worry of that they will not have a person in their life they can really talk to about what's going on in their lives. Related to having a confident and the issue of disclosure is the issue of stigma. It's a form of violence, actually, and we found it logical that people would fear their past stories coming out and then people to stigmatize them for that. And we did find that. People do fear that. People have experienced feeling stigmatized in this way because of people finding out about their past. But we also found that children in schools, being sponsored by residential programs, but in local schools, found that there was a rich-poor divide occurring, and basically the rich children discriminate against poor children, irregardless of one's past. And that's more of a class issue, a wider class issue that occurs in Cambodia as a very class-conscious society. The first quote kind of typifies that. The rich girls at my school gossip and look down on me. They shame me to others because I live in the shelter and I am poor. The teachers try to defend me, but the rich families are too powerful. Another goes on to say, some teachers treat me rudely maybe because I am poor or because they think about my past story. In terms of recommendations to deal with stigma, to the coalition, the recommendation is to develop a training curriculum for participants and communities to address stigma. Practitioners at the round table want the Chab Dai organizations to work together to develop a toolkit addressing stigma as a social construct, and to use this toolkit to deal with stigma with participants if they do experience stigma, and also to decrease the incidence of stigma in the wider settings that participants live and reintegrate back to, such as family, schools, work, communities. And this is the joint recommendation between the research and practitioners. Another theme we found was that sexual harassment was occurring in both shelters and in workplaces that our participants were involved in. First quote typifies shelter experience. I feel sad because one girl seems to like me sexually and I don't feel the same way. The other girls know my problem with her, but they do not help make her stop pressuring me. In this case, we asked this particular girl, and we asked a few others who experienced this, had they told the shelter staff what was going on, and all of them said that no, they had not. They didn't feel they could trust the staff, and that they felt this was too shameful a problem, and it shouldn't be a problem, therefore the staff would be able to handle it. With regards to that, we held a workshop later in the year because this was a theme that had emerged, and put this problem out on the table and try to normalize it, that children who have been groomed and sexually exploited and traumatized in this way, who are then put together in an institution, that it's one way of working out their problems might be in this manner of sexual harassment, sexual violence toward each other. So we tried to get it out on the table, and again, each program now is working on this issue in their own way with their staff to make shelters safer, so that children feel they can disclose and that staff will be aware they should be kind of looking for this problem. The second quote typifies more what's happening in the workplace and wider society. I quit my chef job because the boss would not stop sexually harassing me. I did not tell the shelter the truth about why I quit because I did not think anyone would believe me. The same theme of not having a sense of trust that one could disclose a very real problem, even to shelter staff, comes through in this. And sadly, as well, for this particular participant, it also reflects in wider society that sexual harassment in the workplace does occur. And it's quite disturbing, and perhaps with shelters they could need to prepare their clients as to how they might get help should this sort of experience happen to them. In terms of recommendations to assistance programs and to the coalition as a whole to prevent and deal with issues of sexual harassment, in terms of the programming in residential programs, felt staff training and soft skills training with clients about what sexual harassment actually is and entails, how to disclose, were very important. And all of this is to promote and ensure a safe environment in residential programs. So getting it on the table and getting it out there, understanding it, and making programs safer. In terms of the coalition, it's important to lobby the government as a coalition to lobby for safe and sexual harassment policies in the workplace. In terms of practitioners' response to the last recommendation about sexual harassment, sexual violence, they felt actually a more specific response to sexual harassment and violence in terms of unsafe work environments needed to be addressed. This quote typifies that. It would be helpful to start with a very specific advocacy. For example, advocating for the government to consider entertainment establishments, i.e., brothels, karaoke, massage parlors, beer gardens, the lot, as hazardous work environments, and thus minors should not be allowed to work there. So that would be a sweeping change in Cambodia and a very effective, as a coalition, a very effective way to reduce a lot of risk for a lot of young people to be sexually exploited. And as a coalition, that'd be a very effective move on our part. In terms of take-home messages, coalitions are an effective way for groups to learn from each other, to avoid reinventing the wheel, and to contextualize information. Coalitions can thus develop toolkits and resources to address stigma and sexual harassment. One, to prepare clients if they should experience either, such as in how to disclose, how to advocate for themselves, how to get help. Two, in order to reduce the incidents in the programs themselves through training of staff and participants with the goal of promoting safer environments. And three, to work with specific and wider communities that participants find themselves in to reduce the incidents of either from occurring. Coalitions as well can more effectively lobby governments, in this case to address sexual harassment in the workplace and to advocate that entertainment venues such as karaoke, brothels, massage parlors, whatnot, are unsafe working environments that minors should not be allowed to be in. Thank you very much.
During this presentation, we have overviewed 3 key areas to facilitate connectivity through best practices of collaboration from our lessons learned from the field. So now you can continue the learning process by downloading resources that relate to these lessons learned at chabdai.org, and the vision for the global community at freedomregistry.org and freedomcollaborative.org. Yes, the issue of human trafficking is complex and diverse. Yes, the response is also. But let's be at the forefront of connectivity to address it. So whoever we are, wherever we are, whatever we are doing, let's focus on the common vision, common ground, and connectivity that enables us to work together to end sexual abuse and trafficking. Thanks for listening, and I look forward to our dialogue.